Greetings, everybody. Kenny has invited me back to discuss records with you, and today we're going to talk about Hank Mobley. Hank is one of my tenor heroes. To me, he is not an innovator in the sense of a Coltrane or a Rollins, but he is an innovator in terms of style and taste. And this record here is controversial because it's always, in looking at his discography, it's always this record of Soul Station that is considered to be his masterpiece. I think they're both masterpieces, and for different reasons. Soul Station is just a beautiful, in-the-pocket, mid-tempo, tasteful miracle of a blowing session. That's what that was. This here is a little bit different. There's a little bit more preparation that went into this record. Art Blakey is significant on this record. I think Art Blakey actually pushes Mobley into directions that probably wouldn't have happened on Soul Station. This is an astonishing record as well, although I don't think it's a blowing session. I think again, more thought, more rehearsal, more time went into this record. And what can I say? It's an original deep groove 63rd Street pressing of an absolutely classic Blue Note, and I wanted to share it with you today. One of the important influences of the avant-garde is right here, Paul Desmond. Reading an interview by Anthony Braxton a number of years ago, Braxton was discussing his influences and claimed that one of his profoundest influences was Paul Desmond. And if you look at Desmond's music more closely, it's really not surprising. As beautiful as it is on the surface, as lyrical as he is, as tasteful as he is, as mathematically inevitable as he is, there is a harmonic sense underneath it all of freedom and elasticity to the music that allows this music to be durable. So as beautiful as it is, that underpinning, that energetic underpinning, allows these records to really be considered jazz and not just wallpaper. So this record here, he did a series of these for RCA. George Avakian was astute enough to realize that he was a peer of Brubeck, as important to the Brubeck quartet as Brubeck himself, if not even more so in some quarters. Avakian was astute enough to record Desmond on his own and allow Desmond to pick the material, to pick the musicians, and just proceed. And actually even to write some of the liner notes. And Desmond had a dry sense of humor, a satire and a sarcasm that actually runs counter to the music, but is a perfect complement to the music. Because really, at the end of the day, what this is about is this is the subtlest of rebuttals. It's, okay, the world is beautiful, but underneath it there's something more subversive happening. And this guy is that. He's an amalgam. And he was a brilliant intellectual guy, as most of these people are, and he found a way to express himself on his own unique terms. This record here with Take 10 is a takeoff on Take 5, the title cut. And of course he wrote Take 5, but here we have the same rhythm. It's a waltz beat 5/4, doubling up, and what you have is Jim Hall with space to kind of just throw out these luscious harmonies on the guitar with these beautiful little cryptic lines in between, noodling between Desmond's lines, sinewy lines, and you have a semi-classic record here. Most of the RCAs don't snooze on them. Desmond's an important figure. He doesn't have maybe the fire of some of the post-bop guys, but there is a quiet fire of intellectual possibility, spiritual enlightenment that informs this music. And of course, you could just play it at a lounge. Okay, here we have Shelly Manne, one of my favorite drummers, bar none. Shelly doesn't quite get the due that he deserves, I believe. I mean, he was born in Brooklyn. He cut his teeth in the Navy, came back, played with a number of big bands, and stayed in New York for a while, but ended up migrating westward to LA, and came into the West Coast scene where he made the 4 album series from the Black Hawk is probably some of the greatest live jazz ever recorded. But this record here, which happened, after that sequence of records came out on Contemporary, is also a classic and is a masterpiece. It's a mainstream to modern masterpiece. So this record here was made in 1962, and for a long time it had been a sleeper. This was an original copy, near mint, unused, that I procured maybe 15 years ago for $5 on the street. And to be honest with you, even shops were not selling this record for a lot of money back then. But now the cat's out of the bag, and this record is an acknowledged masterpiece. Coleman Hawkins, Eddie Costa, George Duvivier on bass, beautiful bass playing. They lock fabulously on this record. There are a couple of cuts on this record that are actually avant-garde. There's a free-form piece at the end, which is the last piece they recorded between Coleman and the drums. And they're just conversing with each other, but it's great. And Shelly Manne actually played on Ornette's first record for Contemporary. And Shelly was to say that it was the first time that he had experienced being free as a musician, because Ornette's conception was so free, and it allowed him to free up. So Shelly has a sensibility. Obviously, we have potentials that can only be unlocked by the company we keep, and Shelly Manne is a perfect indication of this. Technically an incredible drummer. He's done all kinds of film score work, many different things in the studio for TV, film, different projects over the years. He was also the owner of the Shelly's Manhole, so he actually was promoting music by his peers by having a venue where they could actually perform. And he put on so many great shows there. Many of the local great talents from the West Coast and LA area, and then he brought in people from New York and other parts of the country as well who were making great records. So Shelly Manne is a hero. He makes great records. He's one of the exalted group of greatest jazz drummers as far as I'm concerned. So here we have Jutta Hipp. Jutta, the celebrated German virtuoso pianist who was subverted into the jazz realm, and after cutting her teeth in Berlin for a couple of years after making the transition to the jazz life, decided to try to make a go of it in Manhattan. Came in I think 53, and ended up through some very kind positioning. I think Mary Lou Williams, a couple of folks actually helped her get a gig at the Hickory House. She was accepted into the New York jazz community. She's no slouch. She's a fine pianist. She's beautiful to begin with. Sometimes when that happens, people are not taken as seriously, but she had what it took to get past those aspects that could probably get in the way of her career. I think for her, though, she did not want the jazz life long term, and decided that the club life, the late nights, the instability was not for her. So she became a seamstress, and she designed clothes and she made clothes, and she ended up living in Queens, and that's how she spent a good portion of her life. But this, getting back to this particular record at the Hickory House, it's a pretty magical record. It's a beautiful blend of a trio working together, not just trio in support of the piano. There's a working understanding between the three musicians, and with Thig Penn on drums, who is very underrated. Peter Ind, actually, who's a very experimental and exploratory player, who was just hitting his stride about this point. So everything comes together on this record in a very nice way. It's a desirable record for, obviously, Blue Note collectors. This is an original Lexington press of the record. Some people believe that the weight of the record has nothing to do with the sound. I kind of beg to differ. I think that the weight does have something to do with the record to some degree. Although the Liberties are not as heavy, and the Liberties do sound good, none of these early records that have like almost 200 grams of slab on them are impeachable. There's not one Blue Note record that I've heard from this era, unless it was totally slammed, that doesn't sound beautiful. There she is.